Hello and welcome to the Women Fantasy Authors YouTube channel. I'm your host, Janet Hanker, and my guest today is Kelsey Josephson. Welcome, Kelsey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Right. Kelsey and I are in the same writers support group. It's for fantasy and sci-fi authors. And that's how I met her and found out about her work. And we're going to be talking today about her book, Forsaken Beauty and the Ether Beast, excuse me, Forsaken Beauty and the Ether Beast. And this is a fairy tale retelling. And for those of you that might be wondering, well, fairy tale retellings, how many ways can you tell a story? Would it be interesting? I'm here to tell you that you can. And she steampunked it. And I really, it was fabulous. I really enjoyed that part. So, Kelsey, tell us about your involvement in the steampunk community, like outside of writing the stories.
Oh my gosh. So the steampunk community is the best. I did things a little bit backwards where I wrote my books before being involved with the conventions because I was originally publishing the book as a serial online
Hmm.
post-pandemic. But since then, I've been to several of the conventions and I love going to give talks and I get to talk about things about like my research and sometimes real history about like the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, because a lot of that is really excellent inspiration for steampunk because there were so many inventions. One of my other favorite things to do is there's a lot of masquerade balls at these
Hmm.
conventions. So you get to dress up when people wear all of these amazing costumes. Like you see goggles, of course, but like these really fabulous dresses and men in suits and men in kilts too. That one's a lot of fun, and getting to watch people do things like tea dueling where they're dueling with tea. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's really fun. And I really enjoy it because it's a group of people who really like to have fun with life and get to embrace some of the silliness of things, but you can also like make it into an art too. So it's a good balance.
I love that part of both the fantasy and science fiction community. And I've been to a World Con where the costuming was fabulous. And it's one of my favorite parts of going to cons too, is all the costuming and the different genres. It's great. It's great stuff. So now let's talk about the story. At the beginning, we encounter Belle as a captive entertainer in what I would call a very twisted circus. Please tell us how and why Belle ended up there.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that I find fascinating about steampunk is thinking about like what makes the technology work. And I was influenced by real life stories of miners, and I put like kind of a sci-fi fantasy twist in it. And Belle's background is that she was a child miner in one of the little villages that would mine the ether that would power everything in the society. And when she was growing up, it was not safe and it would do things to different people. I kind of describe it as like if you're familiar with superheroes, like I don't know, being exposed to gamma rays or like Peter Parker getting bit by a spider. In her case, it made her sick, but it also made her ridiculously strong, like a superhero. And there were stories about her, and it caught the attention of this ringmaster, and he really took advantage of her father, who was already devastated and broken because he's one of these miners as well. So she was sold for a sack of silver into the circus, and um escape had been impossible for her, and like some of it was like very physical, that she can't escape because of the security devices the ringleader would use, but also she was just crushed. She didn't really think there was anything out there for her, so she kind of, yes, she was caged, but she was also caged by her circumstances as well.
Yeah, her mental state at that point. I hadn't thought about the crossover between superheroes, but it makes perfect sense. And the fact that she was really strong was a really important component to the story. And of course, we like strong women characters, both physically and emotionally. So that was a good piece. Now, Beast enters the picture pretty early on in the story, and he ends up being a captive as well. Now we're trying to do this without giving away too many spoilers, but what do we know about Beast at this point in the story when we see him?
So what we know about Beast is that his it's very much looks aren't everything. His first initial appearance, Belle thinks that it's a wild bear in the woods. It's not a bear. He's on the run. We don't know exactly what he's on the run from, and he seems to be intelligent, but his ability to communicate is somewhat limited. He's clearly traumatized. He's been through some things, And I do the fairy tale thing where the number, like things in threes is very important, where they meet together three times before the ringmaster, of course, notices and he's captured as well. And this is whenever Bell really realizes that there is some intelligence there because he finally speaks when he's being captured. But all we know is that he looks like something that should not exist because he's got antler horns, he's got owlish looking eyes, he's a huge bear, but he's very humanoid in the way that he stands and he articulates.
Yeah, and that comes across really clearly, I think, from the very beginning. As the story progresses, Belle and the Beast leave the circus, and I'm not going to give any specifics about that, but on the way of escaping, basically, they encounter a couple of very important allies when they stow away on Captain Charity's airship. Charity is a pirate, and what exactly is she pirating?
So, Captain Charity was one of my favorite characters to write because she is so over the top, and I love that for her. She manages to command quite a presence despite not really being like super strong in the same way Bella is. Like she gets by pretty much on charisma and wit and luck and some intelligence. But what she's pirating that we find out is that it's not for her own gain. There are very huge problems in this society, and she is pirating medical supplies to places that need it because there's been shortages, and she is also trying to do a lot of good for um, her favorite person in the world, getting them her supplies as well for her experiments and her important research because as we come to find out later on, it's very important that she have access to these materials for her research that could prevent things like what happened to Belle from happening.
Right. She's my favorite character too. I mean, and I'm very fond of that core four. We're going to talk about all of them, but man, yeah, I love the swashbuckling bit of it and the fact that it's the pirate with a heart doing good things. Great, great character. I hope well, we'll talk about that later. Maybe there'll be more stories, but we'll talk about that later. So that leads us to her partner, Maureen, who is an inventor in this society, like we're talking, and tell us who she is and her importance to the story, especially in regard to healing the ether poisoning that you just talked about.
Absolutely. Marine, it was a fun character to write as well for different reasons. It was really important to me to have a woman who was very strongly into science and things like that in this because a lot of my villains tend to be mad scientists, but I also wanted to have something a little bit more positive. And yes, she is a mad scientist, but she's the one that you would want in your corner. And unfortunately for her, the people in her town like her leadership so much. So, despite not really wanting to be the mayor, she keeps getting reelected. And so she has to balance her time working on her experiments with making sure that things are running in this community. So she's like the best kind of politician that you would want to have, doesn't actually want the job. But the reason that she's so important for this cure is that years ago, she had been putting in bids for machinery that would take the place and make it much safer for the mining practices for the ether so that communities like Bell's wouldn't have to suffer the environmental and physical aspects of the mining, and we would still have this technology. Um, in her research after she was basically outbid by a rival that we can talk about later, she kind of throws herself into this research, and meeting Belle was kind of the catalyst for really solidifying her commitment to finding a better way to power all of these machines without it hurting people.
Right, right. And she is partners with Charity. So they were a power duo working together to try to make the world a better place. Which is so we've got these two couples kind of moving forward. It's nice to have both of them. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about the it's basically I don't know. Do we think of Beauty and the Beast as a love story? I kind of do. I mean, it's
I
not traditional, but it's that evolving thing. And what I wanted to say is that as I was reading the characters and watching it evolve, in some ways, Beast seemed to be the more romantic or maybe heart-centered of the two. I felt like he wore his heart on his sleeve, and I found him absolutely endearing. And Belle seemed more down to business and focused on what do I need to do to save us. So the love story, if you want to call it a love story,
mhm.
unfolds slowly. So what do you think is the main thing that draws these two people together?
I think that it's a combination of things. Belle, very much after the life that she had, needs some softness in her life. And not that Beast doesn't either, but for him, he kind of has a little bit of a blank slate. Like he knows that he's been through things and he remembers some of it, but not all of it. So I think for him, it's a little bit easier to throw himself more fully into wanting to find love and affection and really falling for this woman who doesn't see him for being a monster. He really appreciates that about her, that like she sees past appearances. My kitty is tail her is trying to swing in front of the computer, but I don't think it's on camera. It's hilarious.
You're good. No, you're good.
But I think for him, it's easier to throw himself more into the romance aspect of it because he does, while he has his trauma, there's less memories of it for him. And we don't really go into too much of what his life was like pre-transformation. We know
Yeah,
bits and pieces, but I think for him, he decides that he wants to be honest with her and he loves her and he's not going to hide who he is. And I don't know, maybe that's the beast in him, that he's going to be honest and he just doesn't have a deceptive bone in his body. And
yeah,
Belle, she really needs to learn to love not just herself, but how to be in a relationship, because all of her relationships were so fraught growing up. Like she really could have been harder than what she was, but I didn't really want to do that to her either because I really
right,
love the idea of somebody rising above their circumstances. But
right.
I think what draws them together is that this is the first person in her life who treats her with some decency and respect and truly is interested in what she has to say and sees her for more than her condition. And I think that that's very mutual for them both.
Right. They're both giving that to each other. That's yes. Right. There's some very kind of, I mean, I'm in a, there's some dark parts of this story. The world's polluted and people have been altered and are sick and dying from so there's definitely some dark pieces. And then you see a scene with Beast with his big clumsy hands trying to cook or make a surprise for Belle. And it's like, so you get these sweet little moments, and I think you're falling in love with Beast along with Belle throughout the story. That's what happened for me. So I really like that part. Did this relationship evolve? Did it as you were writing, did you have it planned out or did it kind of evolve as you were writing the story? Like how it's going to unfold?
So, this book was interesting because I was originally publishing it as a weekly serial, but I
Oh,
did have it
yes.
plotted out. But my whole writing thing, this is going to be so nerdy, but I definitely relate to a quote from a TV show called The Flash, and there was a villain in there called Captain Cold, and he was talking about his plan for um, an adventure that they had coming up. And even though he's a villain, it's very much how I write things. But to summarize, it's make a plan, expect the plan to or execute the plan, expect the plan to fail, throw away the plan. So like I plot things and like my ending is still the ending that I intended, and like my major plot points are still what I intended. But if my character showed me something more interesting, we were going to do that and I would adjust my notes as I go. And that's been true for me for other work as well, where I plot things out, but the moment my characters make things more interesting, we're going to do that. And I knew my beast was going to be a sweetheart. I just didn't realize just how much of a sweetheart he was going to be. And like I had some ideas about like how we were going to show that, but some of the things that he did, that was very much like things that came out whenever I was drafting and then going back to look at it. I'm like, yeah, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. That comes through very clearly in the story. Um, so we've got the four main characters, and there's two. Anyway, those four characters are such fabulous characters and such interesting characters. I'm wondering, do you plan on writing future adventures of them, especially with Charity and her partner?
I've been asked, and I think about it. I'm sure you can relate to this as well, as never having a shortage of the things that you're going to be writing. And when I wrote my book, I very much intended it to be a standalone. But one of the very first ARC readers, like that came back with me for reviews or whatever, is like, "So, is there going to be more?" And I'm like, I hadn't really thought about it, but maybe. But I did try to leave it so that if I wanted to do something else with them, because I do love Captain Charity and Marine and all of the rest of them. It would be cool to do more stories. What worries me is I put them through a lot of trauma in this book. I don't know if I want to re-traumatize them again because they very
I
much earned
know.
their happily ever after, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I think about it. I really do. And I do miss them. And maybe someday I will go back to it.
Well, at least you know you can go back to it. And I would love to see further adventures of this crew, especially since you've developed them so fully and it's such an interesting world. So I have one other character I want to ask you about because of obviously they're villains and not just the ringmaster at the circus. So tell us, who is Delphine and why is she so dangerous?
Oh my gosh. So Delphine is the dark mirror image of Marine, and they have a past history together, and they had known each other in university. And at first, their relationship dynamic, they were partners as well, but Delphine was going down a much more darker, much more ambitious path where she is also as brilliant as Marine is. She sees more the profit and also like the power behind doing some of these wonderful inventions and stuff without really stopping to think about the consequences of these things. And Delphine is also, she's very pretty, she's very influential. She has this way about her of getting people to listen to her. She has the ear of powerful people. And she was the one to outbid Marine all of those years ago about the equipment, the mining equipment, because she was able to throw together machinery faster, cheaper, not necessarily as safe as Marines. And of course, that was what won out. But Delphine, she's very much the sort of person where nothing is ever enough for her. She wanted to know the limits and push past them for what she could do with the ether, which is how we find out that she has a very strong connection with Beast. And it's very much a case of, well, sometimes the world can be small where you can find all of these interconnections between characters because of her past with Marine as well.
We could spend probably an hour talking about all the metaphors, the political implications, and how they relate to future past. We don't have time, but it's deep. There's a lot of stuff to contemplate as you're reading this book. I think that's probably why I would be so interested in seeing a second book, because there's so many things going on at lots of different levels. So it makes it very compelling, I think, as well as all the other stuff that happened, the sweet moments, the exciting moments, the pirating and all of that. It makes the story so much richer to have all that stuff put into the content. So let me share your information so people know how to contact you and find out more. And there we are. We've got your contact information there on the screen. And also, I will put live links down underneath the video when I post it so people can very easily click and go to your website and find out more about you and your work. This is not the only thing you've done. This is a standalone. So tell us about your other series and your other work, please.
Oh, absolutely. The series that got my indie author career started, I actually started writing during the lockdown of the pandemic, and it was originally five short stories that were told sequentially, kind of like episodes of a TV show. It's steampunk as well, less of a romance, but you have characters who love each other and fiercely protect each other. But it's set in an alternate 1893 centered around the Chicago World's Fair. And in this alternate universe, we use more of Nikola Tesla's technology, which is great in some ways because I'm the kind of person who thinks better tech, better opportunities for everybody. So I have an all-female crew working jobs that traditionally they would not have in our own timeline. But I'm a huge Universal Monsters fan, so I throw in some monsters tropes in there as well, and it's a lot of fun. Um, and then I collected those for my first like print book in Monsters and Machines, and that's the easiest way to read them. And I will be writing more in that world, but I leave the characters in a really excellent place, closing out that first major story arc.
Great. I look forward to diving into those. And I know you have a busy life. You're a mom, and it's remarkable that I'm lucky. I'm retired. I have a lot of flexible time, but I'm always impressed when I talk with authors that are parents and have careers and whatnot, and still are able to put out quality work. So Good for you for finding a balance.
Thank you. Um, like this doesn't sound very nice, but I kind of snapped during the pandemic after everybody was sent home.
Mm.
Everything was on, it felt like the world was falling down. And like I'd always planned on getting into publishing, but I always thought I was going to be waiting on someday for my kids to be older. When they were sent home, I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old during all of that.
Oh,
So
Lord.
and I love my kids. And of course, I was going to do anything to keep them safe, but I needed to carve out something that was mine. And so I just thought, if not now, when? So I just went for it and just never looked back.
I've talked to other authors that have said the same thing. When we got shut down, they had a chance to really reflect and start moving on projects that they had set aside for a long time. So, as awful as that was, I guess we made some blessings out of it. And I'm glad for that because our writing is important, especially when things are dark or things are
Yes,
upsetting. So as we move through the next couple of years, of course, we need to keep focusing on our stories and telling the kind of stories that you're telling about looking at the challenges and fighting for better things, because I believe our writing is political, and I think that probably most writers would agree that too. And I mean, not to talk politics today, but all of you that are writers, keep writing and keep sharing your stories, and those of you that are readers, keep supporting us because we have important things to say. Kelsey,
absolutely.
so we've talked all about your writing and your steampunk. Do you have any other outside interests? I mean, do you have a favorite like secret thing that you do? Like, do you like to bake? Do you have a special place that you like to travel or hike, or what? Some little something that's special.
I do a few things. Like whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, I love putting playlists on and cooking curry from scratch because like
Oh,
you have to chop the ingredients and make sure that everything goes just so. And I absolutely love being able to throw together curry. It brings me a lot of joy. Like I have to slow down and take my time with it. Um, and then I'm a huge video game nerd, so I love being
ah,
able to, I don't get as much of that now because some of the games that I enjoy playing, my kiddos need to not be underfoot for, but like I love finding the escape in the storytelling in video games. And I also love paper crafting and like junk journaling and things like that because it's very imprecise and it's okay to make a great big mess with it. I really need to be doing
uh,
more of that.
I like that. I like that. You're kind of stretching your boundaries a little bit. Yeah. I love to cook Indian food for the very same reason. And I have all my little special dishes to put out the little piles of spices. The spices have to go in at different times.
Yes.
So for those of you out there that are cooks as well, raise your hand. I find that it's one of my go-tos as well. That and baking. There's one other thing. We're almost out of time, but there's one other thing, and I wanted to go back to Tesla. Maybe not a lot of people know who he was, but I do. And I regret to this day that something that I believe he invented got squashed. So very briefly, how does he tie into to the steampunk world?
So for a lot of steampunks, he represents everything good about like what you would want an inventor because like for him it was less about the money, although he definitely deserved to get paid and he had gotten I'm trying to think of the polite way to phrase this, but Thomas Edison was not kind to him. Yeah, we do not like him. But he was very brilliant. He was ahead of his time. He predicted Wi-Fi before there was Wi-Fi. He wanted to have wireless electricity free for everybody, which is not a great way to run a business, but it's a great way to help
Yeah.
people. Um, he 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 was very eccentric. He wasn't really like into women. He was afraid of hair, weirdly. Loved pigeons. Like whenever he was old and poor, he was spending a lot of time with pigeons and feeding them. I think that there was a lot of kindness underneath all of the strangeness there, but he was absolutely brilliant and loved to give a good show. I love reading about whenever he does his demonstrations. Like one of his famous ones was the Colombian egg, and he took I think it was copper, and I'm sorry if I got that detail wrong, but a copper egg and made it stand on end using electricity and electromagnets. It's really cool. And like you
Nice.
see pictures of him, if you're familiar at all with the movie The Prestige, with like the light bulbs lighting up because of the wireless electricity, you can find pictures of him like holding a light bulb, not connected to any wires lighting up. And I have a soft spot for him.
Yeah, I do too. I will try to find a good biography or something online that goes through his history, and I'll put it down below your video when I post in case other people are interested in learning more about him because it's a fascinating story. All right. With that, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming today. I really love this book, and for all the reasons that we discussed, I have my fingers crossed for a book two at some point. And I really appreciate your storytelling style. And thank you again for coming and talking with me today, Kelsey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was. It was. And I will see you soon in our group meeting. And to everyone that's listening, please give us a like if you're enjoying the content. Go to Kelsey's website and check out her information and her other work. And thank you again for supporting indie and small press authors. Have a great day. Bye.